let's talk about the big news from the deal street. The Adani Group is set to buy Holcim India's assets, Ambuja Cements and ACC for $10.5 billion in what will be the largest infra and materials deal in India.
And it all began with baffling media reports that Holcim, the world's biggest cement maker, may exit India, a country which makes up 23% of its global cement capacity.
Adani taking the entire India Inc. by surprise by going ahead and very speedily sealing that deal with Holcim.
This would make it the largest deal in the Indian cement industry and one of the biggest exits of an MNC from India.
Hi everybody! On 16th of May 2022, the legendary business tycoon Gautam Adani won the race to acquire a major stake in Ambuja Cements and ACC for $10.5 billion. And as soon as this deal got finalized, the Adanis became the second biggest cement manufacturer in India. And while every single news channel has told us the basic details of this deal, the most important part that they missed out on is the business strategy of the Adanis. So in this episode today, let's do a deep dive and try to understand why did the Adanis acquire a stake in Ambuja and ACC, what exactly is their business strategy, and most importantly as investors, what do we need to understand about the changing dynamics of the cement industry of India and the world itself. This video is brought to you by Wealth, but more on this at the end of the video. The first and the most obvious reason for Adani's acquisition of Ambuja and ACC is something called backward integration. Now, if you're not an MBA student, it might be a little difficult for you to comprehend. So let's try to understand backward integration using the simple analogy of a grocery store. You see guys, the supply chain of a grocery store looks something like this. We first have the manufacturer, then we have the distributor. The distributor is the person who actually buys these products in huge quantities from the manufacturer. And then we have small retail shops who buy products from the distributors in small quantities. Eventually, the retailer sells it to the customers. This is the simple supply chain of retail stores. In reality, we also have wholesalers and local distributors, but for our concept, let's use this simplified version. Now let's say we have a businessman called Mr. Kothari. Mr. Kothari is a Marwadi businessman who has 10 grocery stores in Pune, and one of the most profitable products he sells is a packet of ghee. Now he buys 10,000 packets of ghee per month at 420 rupees each and sells it at an MRP of 520 rupees. Now this is when he realizes that dude, if he gets ghee at 420 rupees, the distributor gets it at 360 rupees, right? So if Kothari himself became the distributor, he could actually get it at 360 rupees and make more profits. So you know what? He goes on to acquire his own distributor and becomes a major distributor for all retailers in Pune. And now his own kirana stores become his distribution company's clients. And now the same 10,000 packets of ghee that he used to buy at 420 rupees, he buys them from his distribution company at just 400 rupees and sells them at 480 rupees. Whereas to other retail stores, his distribution company sells it at a normal price of 420 rupees, because of which they would go on to sell it at 520 rupees. So Kothari's distribution company first makes a 40 rupees profit when he sells it to his retail stores. Then his retail stores make a profit of 80 rupees per packet when he sells it to the customers. And then when he sells it to other retailers, he further makes a profit of 60 rupees. So you see what happened? A retailer became a distributor and started increasing his profit margins. But at the same time, he is also able to sell the product to the customers at a much cheaper rate. Eventually, he is able to compete with other retailers. So if there are 5 local stores, while all 4 stores will sell ghee at 520 rupees, Kothari's retail stores will attract a lot more customers. Why? Because he is selling his product at 24% cheaper cost. Similarly, the same ketchup that he used to buy at 90 rupees, he sells it to his own retail stores at 70 rupees, eventually sells it to the customer for 120 rupees. He sells Shrikhand to his retail stores at 160 rupees and sells it to the customer at 200 rupees. So you see what happened? Mr. Kothari was able to increase his profit margins by becoming the distributor, and then he became his own client, because of which he is able to control the prices better. And lastly, because his company is both the distributor and the retailer, he is able to sell products at a cheap rate and at the same time have a competitive advantage over other kirana stores in the locality. This way, tomorrow he can go on to expand his business to 20, 30, 40 retail stores, and he would only keep making more money. And the next step to this is when Kothari ji realizes that, dude, being the distributor, he already has a supply chain to push 50,000 packets of ghee, 3 lakh packets of milk, 50,000 packets of Shrikhand and 30,000 packets of paneer. So, instead of buying these products from the manufacturer, why doesn't he himself become the manufacturer? So then, Mr. Kothari would then go on to acquire a dairy company that would produce all the dairy products and push those products to his distribution supply chain all the way up to his retail business and to the customers. Again, he'll get more margins, more control and more expansion. This is what we call as backward integration, wherein a company goes on to acquire critical entities of its own supply chain to become more profitable, to have a competitive edge over other rivals, and lastly, to have a better control over the supply chain, eventually expanding the business. This is exactly what Mr. Adani is doing with Ambuja and ACC. As we all know, the Adanis are known to be builders and they have an enormous business in construction and the infra space, wherein they are building thousands of kilometers of expressway, thousands of crores worth of ports, airports and power plants, and on top of that, they also have residential and commercial properties coming up. And all these projects require a ton of cement and a ton of steel. And now that Adani has bought a major stake in Ambuja and ACC, just like Kothari's retail stores became his own distribution company's clients, in this case, all Adani companies in the construction or related business will go on to become Ambuja and ACC's clients. In fact, this is the reason why Mr. Adani said, and I quote, "On the demand side, we continue to execute on a massive number of construction activities that span every one of our infrastructure businesses. I therefore expect us to be one of the largest customers of our own cement business." So you see, just like Mr. Kothari was able to have better control and better profits through backward integration, Mr. Adani and his company is expected to have better control over the prices of the cement, better supply, and more importantly, an edge over their competitors who are again building ports and buildings. It's just that instead of a packet of ghee, you have a bag of cement. And just like Kothari would make money by selling his dairy products like paneer, milk and Shrikhand, Mr. Adani would use and sell all kinds of cements like ordinary Portland cement, Portland Pozzolana cement and Portland slag cement for their own projects, eventually to increase their own profits. And this brings me to the second reason, and this is something that you can literally find on every single news article on the internet, which says that since the Adani Group takes up giant infra projects from the government itself, in the next few years, as a part of the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, we have 100 smart cities, 200 airports, housing for all, and all of these will skyrocket the demand for cement, eventually benefiting the cement industry of India. So when the Adanis build such projects, the cement orders at Ambuja and ACC will increase. Eventually, Gautam Adani's goal of doubling the capacity of these companies is expected to be fulfilled. This is the story behind Adani Group's acquisition of Ambuja and ACC. Now the question over here is, if India is such a lucrative and profitable market, why did Holcim sell its stake to Adanis and leave India altogether? Because you see, the stock price of Ambuja has steadily appreciated by 200% in the past few years. The profits of the company have risen steadily and it's already the second largest producer of cement in India. Then why did Holcim sell, and as investors, why is it super important for you? Well, the first reason for this is that Holcim is a Swiss company and Switzerland is one among the nations that have actually signed the Paris Agreement, and Switzerland's goal is to actually get to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And if you look at the most emission intensive industries in the world, you will know that even if the entire cement industry is considered to be one country, it would still be the third largest greenhouse emitter in the world, only behind China and the US. Secondly, if you remember from our hydrogen episode, we have something called carbon border tax coming up, which is literally bringing in a mega trend of decarbonization of industries.
Carbon must have its price because nature cannot pay this price anymore.
The idea of a carbon border tax is gaining ground in the United States and the European Union.
A carbon border tax to level the playing field for European products if other countries do not go as far as us or refuse to go in the right direction.
Western countries don't want to see companies packing up for places like China or India because of their less stringent environmental rules, which make the goods produced there cheaper.
A huge emitter of CO2 that's often overlooked is cement. Every year, more than 4 billion tons of cement are produced, accounting for around 8% of global CO2 emissions.
We have a carbon neutral vision for 2050, and we are very much aware now what kind of steps we have to do in order to get there.
So long story short, if your emission levels are beyond a certain limit, you will be charged a surcharge on top of the cost of your product in the European Union and other strict countries that apply the carbon border tax. And when it comes to cement, it is one of the most polluting commodities in the world. So the cement industry in general is a very risky business to actually have in your portfolio with respect to Vision 2050. As a result, countries like Switzerland are pushing their companies to go green, because of which they already have one of the highest carbon taxes in the world. And Holcim is even ahead of Switzerland, by the way. They are literally building a world-class product as a substitute to cement itself. And one of the best examples of the same is their EcoPat concrete, which reduces carbon emissions by 30 to 100% as compared to conventional concrete. Similarly, they have EcoPlanet green cement, roofing solutions, mortars, and a lot more coming up. So as an investor, this is a very, very big deal, because it's almost like Volkswagen telling the world that they will produce only hydrogen fuel vehicles and they'll stop producing petrol and diesel cars altogether. That is how big the green and clean industries are expected to become in the next 20 years. And now, if you look at Holcim in India, you will know that India alone contributed to 26% of their CO2 emissions. So, merely by selling their cement business in India, they will be reducing their carbon emissions portfolio by a large extent. In fact, this is the reason why you will see that they did not just quit the Indian market, but they also quit Brazil, Northern Ireland, Sri Lanka, Malaysia, and even Russia. So as investors, this tells us one thing. If the largest cement manufacturer in the world is so bullish that it's quitting the emerging markets to bet on green concrete and green products, it's a revolution in the making, and we need to pay attention to this. And this brings me to the most important part of the episode, and that are the study materials and the reference links that we need to study as investors before we invest into cement or infra stocks. But before we move on, I want to thank our partners Vint Wealth for supporting our content. For full disclosure, even thinkschool is an investor in Vint Wealth. People, Vint Wealth is a platform by which you can invest in bonds of NBFCs with strong backers and earn up to 9 to 11% returns. Now, most of you might be investing into the stock market as a long-term investor. But if you want to make steady returns for a short-term goal, that's where Vint assets can come in handy. The investment process is super simple. You can see the asset page over here that has detailed information about the asset. On the right hand side, you can see a table by which you can determine how many units of bond you want to buy, and the payment process is also super easy. You can pay via UPI, net banking, or even the Vint Wealth fund. And that's it, you are done. By investing in Vint Wealth, you can earn returns that are higher than FDs and at the same time not as volatile as stocks. And do remember, you must also check out all the risks explained on their website before deciding on your investment. Vint Wealth is backed by reputed investors like Zerodha's Rainmatter, Kunal Shah, the CEO of Cred, and many more. And you can check them out from the special link in the description. Moving on, the first thing that I'm attaching is a McKinsey report on the emergence of green cement and the trajectory of the cement industry of the world itself. Read this very, very carefully because it will give you a golden insight about the future of our infra space. The second thing that I'm attaching is a clear text link on what are the pros and cons of backward integration. So if you want to understand the basics of backward integration, that's a very good link to refer to. So the next time if a news comes out that somebody is doing backward integration, you will have a much better understanding of the same. And lastly, the one thing that absolutely blew my mind is that if you draw a comparison between Ultratech Cement, Ambuja and ACC, you will see that Ultratech has a capacity of 120 million tons per annum, whereas Ambuja Cement's installed capacity is just 31.45 million tons per annum, and ACC has a production capacity of 34.45 million tons per annum. So you see, even together, these companies have a total production capacity of only 65.9 million tons per annum, which is nearly half of that of Ultratech. So considering the fact that Adanis are known to be market leaders in any category they enter in, the Adani versus Ultratech battle is going to be super interesting to study as students of business. So keep an eye on that. That's all from my side for today, guys. Please have a look at your study materials. If you learned something valuable, please make sure to hit the like button in order to make YouTube Baba happy. And for more such insightful business and political case studies, please subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.
News.